Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I'd like to start today with a little bit of forecast verification. So I pulled this out of a forecast I produced back at the very beginning of the third week of March, and it was the outlook for the front half of April. Now, if you'd like to get signed up for these, they're free. You just need to email me. It's eric.snodgrass@nutrien.com. And I'll be sure to get you added to the list. But what we're looking at here is my week 3, week 4 forecast. I want to just bring up a couple of important points. When I was thinking about the precipitation forecast, I had predicted that this area was going to see quite a bit of activity. And I related that a lot to the flow of the atmosphere at that time, seeing what the position of the jet stream was in both the North Atlantic and Pacific. And I said I thought the model was a bit too dry in this area. And of course, we did see decent moisture return, especially getting into the upper Midwest. And there was a lot of severe weather earlier in this time period across parts of the Mid-South. But I'll be honest, I was overly ambitious with how stormy this whole region was going to be during that time period. And then when it came to the temperatures, I just want to recall something. I'm just trying to go back and verify what I was doing. I said, the models, everything was calling for this warmer start to April. So I brought in this larger area here where I said the probability of seeing above average temperatures is relatively high. But I threw in a caveat here. I said this is likely due to the way that the MJO is progressing. And if it were to progress over into these cooler phases, which there was worry about that doing, this forecast could fail. And I think it's important we learn these lessons and just review this because that's what the MJO did. We love it this time of year when it's in phase 6, if you're in the midsection of the United States. This is a warm phase. It progressed out of there after the very warm time period we had at the very front of April, right around Easter. And it got into phase 7. And the models were convinced that it was going to just stay in phase 7 for a long time. Well, the latest forecast pops it out of phase 7 by the 23rd and rips it through phase 8 into phase 1. And we're going to talk about what that means. But the longer range models, I think, didn't pick up very well on the progression of the MJO, which made it difficult to see when this transition to this cooler pattern was going to take place. There's another aspect to this as well. And if you come back here to when I made that forecast, right about this time period, we started to see a shift in the behavior of the jet stream, both in the subtropics here and then in the, getting up here into the polar jet stream there. And what was going on was we were losing a lot of momentum again in the subtropics. In other words, we were going to see some split flow, especially off the west coast, while the jet stream was going to move farther to the north and tap into some colder air that was in Alaska. And when we put all that together, this is what the front half of April has looked like from April 1st to the 18th. Let's talk precipitation first. As I said, the regions in through here, which made a lot of progress on beating back the drought, good. But you get over here into pockets of the eastern Corn Belt, and you can see that this is an area where we're still sitting here in the bottom half of years in terms of precipitation rank. It was dry in parts of the southeast as well, but extremely wet. Multiple systems, including the storms we had over the weekend on that stalled out boundary down here, way down in the lower Mississippi River Valley. Now come to the west, Four Corner states, western Texas, especially western Texas getting into the panhandles, very dry. And in the Pacific Northwest, one of the driest kind of ends to a wet season in a very, very long time. And the moisture just seems to have shut off on that weakened momentum that plot I just showed you there in the subtropics, splitting the flow. And we've been discussing the last couple of weeks about what's gone on in California. And if I just back those drawings off there, you can just take another quick look at those precipitation ranks when you look at the first 18 days of April and compare it to the last 129 years. We can then look over at temperatures. And generally speaking, we've been mild here in there, all right, mild compared to average. But we have, since the very, very warm start to April, allowed quite a bit of cooler air to be coming in here, and we certainly have more to be talking about. So that's how things have shaped up, and it's good for me just to go back and verify a forecast, see where I had failures in picking up on the pattern, and also seeing where things were well perceived. And so this is just an exercise I do all the time to see how well I do. Well, this is the issue. Over the last 15 days, we saw a pretty big storehouse of colder air in this region. So we're just going back again to the beginning of the month and looking at the progression of this temperature pattern. And as we do that, we look now at the forecast. And this is a great model. It's called the high split model. And what it does is this particular model allows you to calculate back trajectories. And so I'm just looking in here at where this colder air that's coming through the country came from. And if I zoom in here on Des Moines, you can see that, well, if you go back, that colder air that was in place here at the front half of the month while we were enjoying very warm conditions here, it's been tapped into. And it's been tapped into because of a blocking pattern, a big ridge here over a low out in the North Pacific, really in the Gulf of Alaska, and that big ridge that kind of just came here out of Greenland, Hudson Bay, and between the two, it's just now shoving the air. And so the origins of that really cold air are coming from where it was 15 days ago. And you can see it. Right now, early this morning, the position of the surface front is right here. But if you just step up a little bit in the atmosphere, you can now see where that flow came from. That's where that cold air is coming from, behind that front that is sweeping through the Midwest today, through the plains, and it's heading all the way down, pretty far to the south here over the next couple of days. But do notice how blocked up things continue to kind of be out here in the Pacific. This flow that's going on out here that, as we break this down, will, I believe, introduce precipitation chances to the West Coast, up and down the West Coast, and also be bringing in a shift in our temperature pattern in the Midwestern part of the United States. But until then, look at our all hazards weather map here. We have a broad area where we are concerned about frost this morning. Okay, so this is now just looking at the near term here. This would all be hard freeze, and this would be hard freeze warning in the Texas panhandles. And we're also going to be talking about winter weather in this area, extending here into the Great Lakes Basin. Whereas this morning, we still had winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings out as you get into parts of the high plains and up here into the Rocky Mountains. So let's go take a look at it. We're going to go straight to our high-resolution NAM model. Let's get this out to early this morning. You can see that in the overnight hours, we had the upslope flow in the Rocky Mountains putting down the snow here in Montana and Wyoming. It's now spreading out into parts of South Dakota and northern Nebraska. Now there's a front that's connected here between this weak low that's moving over Lake Superior. And you're going to notice in this animation on the other stalled boundary quite a bit of thunderstorm activity, shower and thunderstorm activity for Florida. But as we play this forward, we get into the afternoon today. That snow begins to spread through Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, and along the frontal boundary right in through this area. This is 5 p.m. this evening. As we then go into the evening hours and the overnight hours, snow spreads through Colorado, southern Nebraska, into Kansas, and then pulls into southern Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois as we work our way into early Tuesday morning. Now that snow spreads through parts of Illinois back into Missouri and eventually over into southern parts of Michigan, Indiana. You can see where the frontal boundary is extending here. And there could be a few little snow squalls, little bursts of snow on the backside of this in that colder air by tomorrow evening. This would be Tuesday evening. Now that front continues to swipe through, and it goes into parts of Ohio where I'll show you the snowfall amounts in a moment. It could pick up a few inches here, and then we'll move this system into the northeast by the time we get into early Wednesday morning. So thinking about all that, this is the high-resolution NAM model's forecast on total accumulated snowfall. Just remember a few things about snowfall in April, okay? Sun angles the next day can come out and melt this quickly. Our surface temperatures are not below freezing, which means it's going to have a hard time sticking on roadways. The other part of this is that we probably shouldn't be using a 10-to-1 ratio on the snowfall amount. So as you're looking at this image, trying to pick up your location and how much to expect, it will be coming in on that frontal boundary, which is why you get this almost streak-like nature in here. But there is the chance, well, let's just go look at it, of picking up 2 inches of snowfall through the next the next 48 hours. We have relatively high probabilities in through here. So for example, northern Indiana, this part of Ohio and Michigan, we're looking at a 50 to 80% chance, and even higher as you get back here into parts of the plains butting up against the Rocky Mountains. So that's the probability of getting 2 inches of snow over the next 72 hours. Let's see what the European model does with it. So we've watched it come down like this. This is now Monday evening, getting us into Tuesday morning. So this is where we're going to watch the snow spread on that boundary. And this then goes into Tuesday afternoon and evening. And so we're just going to see that snow, if I rock back and forth, spread through the eastern Corn Belt, into the Great Lakes Basin, and into the Northeast. Now this is where we pick up with the European, where the high-res NAM drops off. We're going to watch once again for more snow in the interior parts of the Northeast. So parts of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, that area, and also parts of Ontario. Then, see the high pressure cell in place here? That's the one we watched. Came out of Alberta. We talked about it last week. Now it's sitting right here. And therefore, as it moves east, just remember the circulation on a high is clockwise. All right? So as we move this east, what happens is once it sets up here over the Appalachian Mountains, now we have this return flow on the back side of it, which quickly brings in warmth, but also opens this area up to the return of Gulf moisture and therefore the risk of showers and storms. So this is 7 a.m. Friday. As we get into Friday midday and Friday evening, now we start to concern ourselves with what's happening right here with the risk for possibly storms. Some of them could be strong to severe. We'll have to watch it all week long. But this is out there Friday evening. Then as we work our way into the overnight hours and then get into Saturday morning, we'll have to see if this continues to be possibly a nocturnal event that cuts right through the lower Mississippi River Valley and then heads over to the southeast and mid-Atlantic. So by Saturday evening, now we can see from the eastern Corn Belt stretching here all the way down to parts of, Mississippi, well, on the eastern side of Mississippi, but getting into Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, we're going to have to watch out for some storms. Now, turn your attention to the northwest. Remember how dry I showed you it had been in this area. We break down the block in the northwest, and systems, by the time we get to the end of this week, begin to enter the northwest and possibly get into California. This is Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and evening, and the models are sweeping through the west coast, a system, and possibly increasing the chances of getting some very late season precipitation, especially in California. So now we're out here on a Monday, and as we work our way into next week, look at that. So this would signal a pretty substantial shift in the flow of the jet stream in the west, really in the Pacific Northwest, and we need to see what that means for a lot of different things. So let's start to stitch this together. First, snowfall from the European. Okay, let's just take this out here through, let's get through Friday very early in the morning. You can see we're expecting a swath in through here of 2 to 4 inches of snow, maybe a little bit more, and we could get some very heavy wet snow at a brief interlude of this, kind of coming into parts of Indiana, Ohio, southern Michigan before this then stretches here into the northeast. Is it in the GFS? Well, this is the GFS 5-day. So again, we see this area in through here as possibly getting some pretty wet snow in this region, stretching into the northeast as well. All right. So that's what we're seeing from both the models. How about total accumulated precipitation? Well, as we work our way through, it's mainly on that frontal boundary as we get out to Wednesday, now into Thursday, that we're going to see the heaviest precipitation, and then the stalled boundary over Florida. But remember, as the high pressure center at the end of the week moves here over toward the Appalachian Mountains, we get the return of the moisture right here. Watch. This is Friday morning, Friday afternoon and evening. Now getting into the overnight hours and Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening, actually getting into Sunday. And that's what we're going to have to watch at the end of this week for the weekend. And again, my concern would be for thunderstorm activity out of this. And then at the very end of this animation, we start to see the moisture coming into the west. I'll just rock back and forth here over the weekend into early next week, and you can see the moisture return there. And it is in multiple model runs. It's not just in one run of the ECMWF. Now, this pattern change is the most tricky thing to forecast. So we're looking at troughs and ridges. This is the deep trough this Tuesday that brings in the frost freeze event that gets pretty far to the south. The Pacific is still blocked up. See the high over low. And we're going to watch this trough right here bring in a reinforcing shot to the Canadian prairie by Friday. All right. But we did notice at that same time, at the surface pressure field, there's a high pressure cell here. So we start to pull that moisture in this direction, and what do you see? Well, there's a trough right down here. So that trough sweeps through, and that's going to be the thing we're going to watch for the initiation in this area for the strong to severe storms late in the week and the start of the weekend. Now, into early next week, that is the trough that breaks finally out of the Gulf of Alaska, sweeps into the northwest, and increases precipitation chances there. And this would be the start of this warm-up in the midsection of the country following that really, really cold Arctic air that's been in place. Now, unfortunately, with this change, these troughs sweep through. which increase our chances of severe weather and thunderstorms in that area. Kind of just made that weird looking D. So that sweeps through, and then the pattern just washes everything out after that. We lose our signals beyond that time period. So to go anything beyond 10 days right now is going to show very little skill. So if we look out there into week 2, we see from west to east the pieces coming together. That's when the block breaks down in the Pacific. We bring in the troughs into the west. Precipitation chances increase. Then as these troughs eject, we've got our first one this weekend, which is possibly increasing the precipitation chances here. And then the second one following that comes out of the mountains. And I'll just tell you, this will be the area at the end of April, beginning of May, that I'm going to watch most carefully for increased thunderstorm activity, return of Gulf moisture, and a very active time period. So unfortunately, we come out of the cooler weather, and now we're going to be dodging raindrops to get a crop planted. The GFS is on board with this as well. It's the same forecast time period from the GFS, but the only difference is the GFS has got a little bit drier signal down here farther to the south. That does not mean dry, just drier signal at this point. Okay, as we continue, let's move over to temperatures. We're going to do max temperatures first. As we go through today, 90s in the Central Valley of California up the I-5 corridor here. But you can see already the position of that front. And as we let this go forward, these are high temperatures. This is Tuesday's highs, getting into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the mild air begins to return at that point. Overnight lows. Keep an eye on this white contour. That's our freezing line. Here's Monday morning's lows. Now we get into Tuesday morning lows. Something to take note of in Kansas. We're starting to see the National Digital Forecast Database showing these low 20s in this area. Teens along the high plains. I'm concerned about the winter wheat in that area. Wednesday morning. Again, you see a lot of 18s, 22s. This area here is seeing those low 20s, upper teens for low temperatures. And that white line there showing the extent of the frost. Keeping going, this is now Thursday. It appears that through the Appalachian Mountains, possibly in and around Raleigh, North Carolina, we could get a low 30 reading here and maybe get close to a frost. But as we go from Thursday into Friday, again, another chilly one here in parts of the mid-Atlantic and along the Appalachian Mountains into the northeast. But then the pattern seems to relax a bit into next weekend. Okay, so let's show you this frost extent. This is what the European model is currently calling for frost extent through the 28th of April. So if you see gray, that's an area that the European model is predicting a surface temperature below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And I got asked a great question over the weekend about this typhoon that is near the Philippine Islands right here. And it's a powerful one. It was a super typhoon, the most powerful system we've seen in this area in a long time. And as you look at it here on satellite, this is a monster of a system. Does it recurve, get into the Pacific jet stream flow and impact us? If it does, it's more than 10 days out. I've watched the animations. It's more than 10 days out on this. So day 5 through 10 pattern from the GFS model. Well, we remember that it was keeping the cooler air in here where that trough was going to set up, right? But more mild as you get farther to the south of there. And it's also seen in the European. Very similar pattern in both models. As we then stretch this out even farther, this is now going to be the European model out there to day 15, so day 10 through 15, and this is the GFS at the same time period. So the models begin to wash out the flow, which is why they don't find strong anomalies, which brings me back to where we began. If we talk about the progression of the MJO, it is going over into phase 8 and into phase 1. And as I said earlier, if you're east of the Rocky Mountains, you'd rather have it over here in phases 5 and 6. These are the cooler phases, phase 8, 1, 2, 3 of the MJO for North America this time of year. And I can kind of show that to you. We're looking here at phase 1 in April, May, June, that time period. And we can see that it generally favors a trough in this area. And that's exactly where we saw it. So there seems to be a lot of correlation there. As we move forward, if it does pop over into phase 2, well, let's just go have a quick look. We'll click on phase 2, slide this up, and you just tend to notice that this is not a pattern that brings in, well, look at what phase 6 can do. Maybe that's why I can explain to you why I like phase 6. Brings in a large ridge into this area, and that tends to just bring in, well, better chances for above average temperatures. So as we look out longer term, let's just finish this up now. European model looking out here to the May 2nd through May 9th. It continues to keep that phase 1, phase 2 look in the MJO, which is up here, and that would just be a signal toward the Canadian prairie of having some cooler weather. But does it really open up and bring in the warmth into this region? I'll just say this, if it does, we tap into Gulf moisture and we start to see a lot of thunderstorm activity with that setup. So that's what I've got. This is what we've been covering and watching the trends over the weekend. And I hope it was instructive and intuitive, and we'll continue to watch it. Appreciate your attention. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks.